Looks like our team will never be the same now after this conflict.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the beginning of the third and final phase of the review series I've been reviewing since the beginning of the year. And it's for, the 13th film of the MCU and 13th of the Infinity Saga. And that's going to be 2016's second third installment we got, Captain America Civil War. Once again, directed by the Russo brothers, returning from the Winter Soldier. What's the plot as well? With many people now fearing the actions of superheroes, the government decides to push for the Hero Registration Act, a law that limits a hero's actions. This results in a division in the Avengers. Iron Man stands with this act, claiming that their actions must be kept in check, otherwise cities will continue to be destroyed, but Captain America feels that saving the world is daring enough and that they cannot rely on the government to protect the world. This escalates into an all-out war between Team Iron Man, which consists of Iron Man, Black Panther, Vision, Black Widow, War Machine, and Spider-Man. Two of them are new recruits. And Team Captain America, which is Captain America, Bucky Barnes, Falcon, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, and Ant-Man, while a new villain emerges. Yeah, so how was this film made? Well, in March 2014, Anthony and Joe Russo confirmed that they had signed on to return as directors for a third Captain America film, along with Chris Evans as Captain America, Kevin Feige as producer, and Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely as screenwriters. Marcus and McFeely had been working on the screenplay since late 2013, while the Russo brothers began work in February 2014. The rehiring the directors, 3 months before the release of Captain America the Winter Soldier, came as a result of Marvel executives being impressed with test screenings of that film. Evans earned $15 million for the film. In an April 2014 interview, Joe Russo described the project as a continuation of the story from Captain America the Winter Soldier. What's nice about the film, he says, is that it's a two-parter. There's a journey that the Winter Soldier goes on that isn't complete yet, and that month Marvel announced a release date of May 6, 2016. And Trent Opalacho, who is a cinematographer of Winter Soldier, said he would return for the sequel. And then in July, Marcus and McFeely said they were midway through a first draft of the film, in which principal photography was expected to begin in April 2015. The following month, they stated that they were looking to make the tone of the film an amalgam of the first Avenger and the Winter Soldier, while the Russos likened it to a psychological thriller, citing Seven, Fargo, and The Godfather as influences, along with westerns and Brian De Palma's films. The Russos also stated a good portion of Civil War is actually funnier than Winter Soldier, with a more comedic tone and lighter moments throughout. In August 2014, and the Russos then stated the film will be set a couple of years after Winter Soldier, 2 years, and will continue to focus on Steve Rogers' relationship with Bucky Barnes, as well as the political themes related to Captain America. And Anthony stated the character was invented for an explicitly political purpose, so it's hard to get away from that nature. Russo said that they would be bringing some new elements on the table that would give them a twist of Winter Soldier, and indicated filming is going to begin in Atlanta, and they described themselves as ecstatic with the first draft of the screenplay submitted by Marcus and McFeely, and also stated that the film's title would be announced in a month or so at most, and that the concept and title for the film came from Feige, who had it for a while. In September, Joe expanded by saying the film would have another big idea that alters the universe in a whole in some way. Similar to S.H.I.E.L.D. following in The Winter Soldier, the rest of the film, such as the character story and tone, would be left open to the Russos and writers' interpretations. By October 2014, Robert Downey Jr. had then entered final negotiations to reprise his role as Tony Stark in Iron Man the film, and Downey was added in order to adopt the 2006 and 2007 Civil War comic book storyline written by Mark Millar, which pitted Iron Man against Captain America. And at the end of the month, it was confirmed that Sebastian Stan would return as Bucky Barnes in Winter Soldier. Then a few days later, Marvel revealed that the film would be titled Captain America Civil War, confirming Downey's appearance and announcing Chadwick Boseman would appear in the film as new hero Black Panther ahead of his own solo film. Feige also confirmed that the film would be the first in MCU's Phase 3 slate of films, and Anthony Russo stated that adopting the Civil War storyline was not always the intended storyline, and direction for the film, and the brothers initially signed on to return as directors. Marcus then expanded on this, saying the original concept for a third Captain America film never got to draft, and Feige stated that at some point, telling the writing team to begin adopting Civil War around their original ideas, and McFeely also added that despite the shift in direction for the film, the central theme, even the way Zemo is operating, are from the earlier iteration, and Russell's even revealed that had negotiation with Downey to appear in the film failed, they would have used the Mad Bomb storyline for the Captain America comics, which was eventually used as a plot point in the first season of the Agent Carter TV series, which I have not watched. The premise for the film would have centered on Zemo detonating the Mad Bomb, which would turn hordes of people into berserkers, or present a slight physical threat to Captain America, which still pitting heroes against each other, and some would be zombified due to the Mad Bomb to satisfy emotional competent for the film. To be honest, guys, I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. I think this is a better idea. So after the film was shot and marketed, Captain America Civil War had its world premiere in Los Angeles on April 7, 2016, and was released in the United States on May 6, 2016, as the first film in Phase 3 of the MCU. The film was a commercial success at the box office once again, grossing over $1.1 billion worldwide, became the highest grossing film in 2016, and received positive reviews again, including praise for the performances such as Evans and Downey, action sequences, and themes. A fourth film, New World Order, which we should not be having, set for release on May 2024, and it's going to be a continuation of the Disney Plus series Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I refuse to watch. But, as for my reaction to this movie, I think this one's good, yes, but I think it's a bit overrated, if I'm going to be honest. A lot of people seem to overly call this is the best MCU movie of all time. This is my favorite movie of the MCU. This is the Empire Strikes Back of the MCU. No. No, it isn't. I disagree with it being the Empire Strikes Back of the MCU. I'm sorry. No. Nothing tops Empire Strikes Back. And also, I don't get how it's called Cap Civil War when most of the Avengers are in this, so in a way, shouldn't this be called Avengers Civil War or Avengers 2.5 because it's technically the other half of Avengers 2? Obviously, it doesn't follow the Civil War comics, but Marvel still managed to make a great movie out of it though. Even with many or few characters, it still worked and were all shown well in the movie. The characters too are very enjoyable, the action was again awesome, the story was great also, and it was hard for me to find some nitpicks in this movie, but there were only two. A few anyways. The plot had an excellent premise with a plausible world reaction to the exploits of a group of people with superpowers and a good villain. Where it slightly falters as a standalone movie is the introduction of several new characters that just bogs down the proceedings. But for the wider franchise narrative, it's necessary. And several characters have emotional arcs to go through in the story, there's only so much time to do it all. All that being said, it has some of the best moments of the franchise too, specifically during the scenes of eternal conflict amongst the central characters. Iron Man, Black Panther, Captain America, and Winter Soldier are involved in some very compelling scenes, as are Wanda and Vision. Some of the visuals are incredibly well done. The early Lagos action scenes hit like a sledgehammer, and you can almost feel the impact of what is being shown. The airport showdown is excessive, but so much fun you can imagine the writers planning in a fanboy's ultimate fantasy. And the final confrontation is well made from a spectacle and character perspective. And tonally, Civil War is tonally different from Winter Soldier in that it's more bombastic in its storytelling. Again, there are a lot of Avengers in the movie, more than the freaking Avengers movies. While Winter Soldier was a relatively grounded, dark political thriller, Civil War is a louder, more colorful take on the political theme, and a much more personal one as well. This time it's a matter of morals and ethics, and it's amazing how the movie pulls off giving each side the argument, weight, and credibility, so you can argue about who's right and who's wrong all the way. And Steve wants to protect his best... In this one, after the events of the Winter Soldier, Steve wants to protect his best friend Bucky, who was brainwashed by Hydra, and is now a fugitive from the law, and is being framed for the bombing of the Accord's headquarters before they can be fully signed. Steve Rogers doesn't trust any form of government faction. He says how far corruption goes, and he's not willing to lose jurisdiction of the Avengers to yet another corrupt governmental body after the Winter Soldier. However, Tony wants everyone to sign an agreement for the UN so they won't be seen as a threat by the world's governments due to their track record of leaving behind masses of casualties, especially after the events of Age of Ultron. It's a terrific plot, very thrilling and character-driven. At its core, it's a very personal story between Steve and Tony. The other characters are written as complementary pieces to one puzzle. It's not gratuitous at all. You understand everyone's ideologies, why they disagree with each other, when they're on the sides that they're on, and while they're fighting for what they're fighting for. and they're each given enough screen time for us to care. And the action scenes are the Winter Soldier level. Nothing quite beats the first confrontation between Captain America and Winter Soldier, but the end of the second act of this movie has an action sequence that is absolutely mesmerizing. It's the Civil War. Just seeing all these superheroes go against each other is exhilarating and very heartbreaking to watch. And their interactions are hysterical, especially since a lot of them are meeting each other for the first time. Well, some of them are, anyways. Some of these guys already met. There's two specific new ones, and one new one. Those three are meeting for the first time, or those three are meeting these Avengers for the first time, either teaming up with them or going against another side. And the new characters are excellent too. Black Panther makes this hell of an impression as a sophisticated Wakanda diplomat, and then also, this movie introduces two characters. Black Panther, easily the best new character introduced in this film, and this movie actually introduced us to MCU Spider-Man. And honestly, I think of all his appearances in the MCU, this Spider-Man was easily the best portrayal of his appearances in the MCU, before No Way Home anyways. This and No Way Home are his best portrayals, because I'm not really a big fan of the Spider-Man portrayal, if I'm going to be honest, guys. And there's a good reason. The reason why I'm not is because after this movie, sadly, Homecoming ended up turning him into the infamous nickname Iron Boy Jr. Yeah. Most of his appearances in MCU, he does not even feel like Spider-Man. He just feels way too much like Iron Boy Jr. in Homecoming and Far From Home. The only time his Iron Boy Jr. moments work are Infinity War and Endgame. Those should have been the only times he should have been called that. The rest of his appearances should have just been simply Spider-Man. Okay? But major props to Tom Holland for sounding exactly like how do you expect Spider-Man to sound like in this film. It's an absolute joy to watch. One aspect of Civil War I even find especially fascinating is the use of its villain Zemo. You have no idea what he's plotting for a good chunk of the movie. He shows up intermittently as the first couple of acts are playing out, doing cryptic stuff vaguely involving Hydra, and finally the third act converges on Zemo why he's doing what he's doing, and it's about the simplest thing, vengeance. It's incredible to watch this ordinary man, no powers or abilities, just a smart, patient man, have a conceivable shot at destroying the Avengers, and the actor Daniel Bruhl is excellent too. It's a nice change of pace from the invincible demigods and dull dark elves we've been getting in previous installments. In fact, I think this was probably the first time a villain in an MCU movie was not generic for a change. After so many generic villains, it was refreshing to see one finally get an actually refreshing villain that you can sympathize with for a change in this one. In this movie, even, each character has their own shining moments, but the core of the story is Stark versus Rogers, so while it's fun to have Paul Rudd come in and have a few laughs and have a few new characters introduce us, I don't think anyone's expecting huge things from Ant-Man here, and the grand spectacle at the airport between these characters was indeed a highlight. And when you have characters like Vision and Scarlet Witch who are so powerful they could end the fight instantly, it's a good idea to have them simply do damage control. I always wondered how they were going to be able to handle these two after they just got introduced in Age of Ultron. They did a decent job of it. In fact, I think Wanda was better portrayed here than she was in Age of Ultron. Honestly, despite the little scenes she has, and after this film, thankfully Infinity War continued to go this route with the character as well, and also another thing with Iron Man in this movie, most of his appearances, he's often 100% jokes usually sometimes. This movie though, you'll notice that Iron Man is not 100% jokes in this movie, and sometimes he's actually really angry. And it's a good thing too, because this is the movie where Tony Stark fully matured after the events of Age of Ultron, seeing all the casualties he's caused and stuff, and here, you can tell he's really learned his lesson from all the casualties the Avengers caused and now wants to make sure less happen here. So I really like that here. While there's some humor in the older Marvel films did work, they sometimes overcome a little bit. I never know Civil War is a movie that can be treated with more suspense. In fact, once again, like Winter Soldier, there's a little less humor in here, aside from some of the side characters, and that's kind of about it. But When it comes to the story, though, what I liked about the story is that although it dealt with a lot of the characters who all by themselves aspired to be in the spotlight, as most of them would ultimately get their own movies like Black Panther, for instance, 2 years after this, it kept a very good balance that followed a clear central theme so that it never felt overfilled with unnecessary sidelines or was embarrassing chaotic like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was, which was a catastrophic disaster and probably the worst Spider-Man movie. So I will excuse certain weaknesses that all Marvel movies seem to have, which often are considered as certain immaturity and incompetentness of the plot without giving away too much spoilers like here. And this movie was also an introduction to actor Daniel Bra, who played Zemo in this movie, so this was my first introduction to him. I don't think I've seen anything else from him, though. So, let me know what other movies I should watch from this guy, because I really loved him as Zemo. Zemo is this very quiet manipulator with a tragic human side as well. The screenplay for the film was also amazing. The majority of the script was suited the plot really well, and it did a great job with all the MCU characters, especially with the first, besides a few corny lines. There were lots of great lines in the film involving comedy and drama, and the way the plot was together was great, and one of my favorite MCU ones as well. And I'm glad these guys got picked to direct Infinity War, too. I'm glad they kept the Russos for the next two Avengers movies. And the film's soundtrack was engaging and very good. Even though I couldn't distinctly remember bar for bar, it's still interesting and gave the story more life. And what impresses me about this movie is how much good was done in a short amount of time for each character. There's really clever time-saving tricks like Tony using the broom to bust open the hatch that causes a Spidey costume to come dangling down, or that saves them minutes of precious dialogue, and it just cuts straight to the point. During the whole scene of Peter's place, almost every single line of dialogue counted towards something important, with just enough fluff to make it sound like a real conversation instead of movie dialogue. And the same is true about the scene near the beginning with Tony's holographic flashback, and that scene serves so many purposes at once. Like, first, it got me caught like in the background story, and then gave me insight into Tony's attitudes and regrets concerning his parents. Then, when it was shown that it was this therapy technique, it showed me that Tony still has the unsolved emotional issues concerning his parents, which then set up the stage for the reveal that causes Tony's later actions. Because basically, we find out in the end of the beginning of the movie, we see Howard Stark getting killed by this unseen figure, and he have his shocked face as he's about to be shot. Then, during the end, when they're about to apprehend Zemo, Zemo uses one last trick to tear them apart for good. And that Bucky was the guy that pretty much killed Tony's parents. And when Tony, who was actually finally realizing his ways and realizing he was kind of getting in the way of Steve trying to stop Zemo, and when he tried to unsuccessfully go to Ross to reveal the truth, and Ross clearly did not care. I'll get to Ross in a bit, guys. He was pretty much, he had to go down to Siberia to help Cap get Zemo himself, and then he then finds out Bucky was the guy who killed his parents, and then he's really now ticked and tries to kill Bucky and Steve, tries to kill Bucky, and Steve now has to pretty much fight Tony to stop him from doing that. So that was a very heartbreaking moment. You could really feel Tony's anger and heartbreak when he found out the truth, and that Cap pretty much lied to him. Because there's also moments in this movie where Tony's acting like he and Steve used to be friends, even though earlier film he explains to Cap how his followers talked highly about him to Tony that he just wanted to punch him in his perfect teeth, like their friendship pretty much came to an end in this movie for about 7 whole years. And there's moments where this built-up rage shines through Johnny Jr's performance as Stark, especially after he found out the truth regarding his parents. That shows Robert really put a lot of care to this character. We've never seen this from him since Iron Man 1, and Iron Man 1 even. And the characters, they're all great. They were given enough time to shine, especially Spider-Man, and you won't be disappointed with Black Panther because he's also great. He was also great in this one. And the new characters are great. And while some of their films, their solo films they got were not all that great, they did shine pretty well here, and it was a good spot to introduce these new characters in. I'm sorry, guys. And once again, the performances are still good. Downey Jr. is amazing as Iron Man here. This was probably his best Iron Man portrayal since Iron Man 1. He regrets everything he's done, and that's why they need to be the Avengers need to be put in check, is what he feels like. Captain America still staying Boy Scouty though, and Chris Evans still nails it, the guy who dressed up as a flag. And the other Avengers were given the time to shine, and the real villain Zemo is the first Zemo in the MCU that's just some guy who has a plan to tear the Avengers apart and put some layers of the character, but the villain is not forgettable for once. And the action scenes are fantastic. Well, some of the scenes felt too shaky at times though, but that's just one scene where Bucky, Black Panther, Captain America chase scene. The best fight for me was easily Cap versus Iron Man scene in the final action scene of the film, where Iron Man fought the truth that the Winter Soldier killed his parents, and Cap tries to save Bucky from Tony. The fight was amazing. I love to see it again, and a very heartbreaking fight too. The second one is also the airport fight sequence. It's also one of the best of the film, where the superhero versus superhero fight happened, and the fight sequences were handled pretty well, and they gave emphasis of the hero's abilities to Spider-Man's quips. My other favorite and also, we also see Ant-Man in this movie grow big, like in the comics and the Ultimate Avengers movies, his other power. And this is where Giant Man actually appeared for the first time in the MCU. After Ant-Man introduced him as just Ant-Man, where he shrinks, this time we actually see his other superpower where he actually grows. So it was nice to see that other power get introduced in this movie. So the action sequences are great, and the Russo brothers really knows how to do action here. And the different ideologies between Cap and Iron Man are handled very well. The Sokovia Accords thing where they needed to be under the eyes of the government. The Avengers ID, not anymore a private agency, was handled well. The setup as to why Cap and Tony fight was handled greatly, and they take time to emphasize their different ideologies. The second major one was Bucky. Bucky is this huge in the conflict. He was framed by Zemo and makes a child thinks that Bucky killed his father with the bomb on the United Nations when the accords were about to be signed. And the whole government think of that. Cap found out about Zemo, wants to find him to know the truth, and making them split in two groups, like Team Cap and Team Iron Man, leading up to the airport fight, where they know where Zemo is heading, and all of Team Cap was up there to go with him, but Team Iron Man finds him, and the fight begins as well. So it was a perfect little build-up right there. In this one, a lot of viewers even feel confused which side they'd be on, because both men are right in their respective ideologies. No one's in the right or wrong here. Marvel did a great job up with that here. There it is. And this, I know how I often mention Harold Hartigan in my MCU reviews, previously 3. Well, this would be the 4th chapter of Harold Hartigan's story. And well, you know how some things seemed a little bit fine for Harold in the previous 3 in Avengers 1, Winter Soldier, and Age of Ultron's reviews. Well, things get tragic here for Harold. Because obviously 1 year's passed since him and Grayson graduated the apprenticeship program, helped defeat Ultron, and became full-on Avengers. But the government, of course, cannot tolerate the fallen damages that get caused in their missions, and they have to create a new document called the Sokovia Accords with forced retirement they don't sign. Harold actually decides to accept the forced retirements after the events of Age of Ultron, and he lets Grayson, who decided to sign the Accords, take on the Chopper mantle, so it's a fair deal between them. They're at least able to work it out. Unlike the Avengers that have a hard time figuring out which side to choose, like Harold and Grayson do work it out at least. But then disaster strikes when the Sign is ambushed by a new foe, and now pretty much Harold has to basically be forced to break the law and pretty much join Team Cap in order to take down Zemo, basically. So yeah, Harold would not sign while Grayson did. And then during Black Panther's first fight scene, Harold, along with the 4, aka the 3 Harold was with, get apprehended. Harold's now also, like Cap, branded the criminal. Of course, he breaks out with Sam, Bucky, and Rogers, and they then recruit what is obviously Team Cap to help them stop Zemo, while Grayson would be on Team Iron Man. And during the airport fight, Grayson realizes what the Accords are really doing to them as a team, and he's pretty much goes with Harold and the other 2 to Siberia, where you know the other 2 I'm talking about. And that also makes Grayson a criminal now, because he basically betrayed his fraction. Once they get to Siberia, Harold and Grayson pretty much get told to wait outside the base in case Zemo escapes, which we know happens, and gets out first before they do so they can apprehend him. We all know how it goes. When Zemo's about to commit suicide after completing his goal, T'Challa tries to persuade him that justice will come, and that Zemo then tries to shoot himself anyway. Harold and Grayson then try to take the gun from him, but in the shuffle, the gun with the 1 bullet is accidentally fired, and the bullet pretty much hits Grayson in the heart. So after Zemo is apprehended and Grayson's bleeding to death, his death scene would be that he apologizes to Harold for not listening to him earlier and pretty much tells him to bury him in Edinburgh, the destination he always wanted to go to, which Harold nods and agrees to do. And then we know how the movie ends, like during the montage with Roger's letter, and when Cap's pretty much freeing his comrades from the rafts and stuff. We all know how that goes. Harold will be shown putting Grayson's body in a handcrafted gravesite near a huge tree in one of Grayson's drawings, and that's where Harold's part in Civil War ends. And just when you think maybe he'll get happier, no. Trust me, guys. In Infinity War's review, Harold's going to get mentioned again, and it's not going to get happier for him here. And now back to the review. With all the heroes shown in Captain America Civil War, there's a lot of hype to deliver, and amazingly it manages to both satisfy those that wanted to see an all-superhero melee and paints a great story about friendships. There was a huge risk trying to put in all these heroes, yet remain a story for Steve Rogers. And focuses where it needs to be, as it's showing a guy who's got to figure out which friendship is more important, Bucky or Stark. Both newcomers Black Panther and Spider-Man are welcome whirling to the MCU as they get plenty of scenes. The actual battle in Civil War is 25 minutes of pure joy that show why movies were made, and see moments like that come to life. And the best set piece, though, has to be the airport throwdown, and feel like there was an actually good build up to the throwdown between the two disagreeing fractions. And not only that, the airport is empty, so you can watch the fight with maximum comfort, not worry about civilians or wanted destruction. Well, that's because, Team Iron Man had to evacuate the airport before they could fight. And with the build up to the fight, you can definitely see the characters really develop, not only in this film, but the preceding ones as well. Tony Stark started off as basically this neocon in the first film, led to a guy who opposes the government and is now believing in accountability therefore being surprisingly fair to the super registration accord. Steve Rogers, the guy who's a relic from a different time, is basically someone who always wants to do the right thing and work for the government that looks out for its own self-interest may not be the right thing. Both have equally valid points. However, the reason I find this movie a bit overrated is because of these backplots. Like, first off, I mentioned how this movie should not be called Cap Civil War, so there's that. And second, Emily Van Camp as Sharon Carter kind of disappointed me in this, because after the role she kind of played in Winter Soldier, she doesn't really have a big role in this movie, and she doesn't really do much. And then just kind of disappears around the middle, and then that's it. We just don't see her again. And while Zemo was a pretty fine villain, I don't think he played a lot of big role either. And I kind of wanted a bit more scenes from him. And another big factor, I really hate how Ross from The Incredible Hulk is back in this. Because I just hate freaking Ross in this series. Like, when you think he may have finally changed after the events of Incredible Hulk, no. It turns out he's just still the same asshole he was in Incredible Hulk. Except probably much worse now. Because he's basically, even after Tony reveals the truth of what really happened, Ross doesn't give a shit. No. He's more upset about the stupid airport incident. He's more upset about about all the casualties. And he basically seems to be fine with willing to have Team Iron Man arrested as well, after some of them didn't even follow his orders and because they caused damage to the airports. So basically he seemed perfectly fine getting Tony sent to jail. Too, with Team Cap. And while I do like Spider-Man's film, I mentioned before, his suit sets up this mediocre Iron Boy Jr. trilogy because of the tech he has. I would have rather they just kept his original suit, like in the comics, to be the suit he wears in his solo MCU films. Just leave the Iron Boy Jr. suits for the Infinity War duology, and that's it. And I even feel like having Tony be his mentor is just forced because he's not even his mentor in the comics. And another problem I have with the movie is, we know how Rhodes falls and gets paralyzed. I don't get how Rhodes survived his high fall after Vision accidentally disabled his suit, because in real life that fall would have killed him instead of paralyzed him, like how it should have ended, even pointed out. And with the Thanos post-credit scene from Age of Ultron, I feel like that should have been in this movie. It would have been a perfect setup for Infinity War here. They could have saved the Infinity War setup for this one. And save that Winter Soldier end credit scene with Bucky for Age of Ultron, because Civil War comes after Age of Ultron, and Infinity War is technically the next Avengers movie that comes after Civil War. But despite those bad qualities and being a bit overrated, Civil War I still think is a good intro to Phase 3. So in the end, Cap Civil War is easily a worth watching and buying for any MCU fans collection, and those that want to see the Avengers be ready to take a bit of a darker turn, as we know what their next team up is. Anyways, that's it for my review of Cap Civil War. If you're wondering how I'm going to rank Cap Civil War, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are a Captain America fan and want a slightly better Avengers 2 if you were not happy with Age of Ultron, then I would definitely recommend watching this movie and buying it for your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Captain America Civil War, I'm going to give Captain America Civil War an 8 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Captain America Civil War. And now we all know the next MCU review is going to be, of course, another solo film that introduced another hero, except this time it wasn't one wearing a suit, and it wasn't a god, and it wasn't an alien. It was a wizard who has the Time Stone and was the first Doctor of the MCU. Yeah, guys. Our next MCU rewatch is going to be Doctor Strange, and honestly, I've only watched this movie once, so I'm definitely gonna need to rewatch this one if I'm gonna review it, because I've only seen this movie one time. But I still liked it from the last time I saw it, so I'm sure I'll still like it. It'll still be better than anything that's happening today with MCU, especially the Multiverse of Madness. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.